So hi, everyone. Welcome to tonight's workshop on the topic of divorce in college. My name's Vicki Vollweiler, and I'm the founder of College Financial Prep. And I'm going to be speaking about the financial portion of applying to college. And I'll let her introduce herself, Eleanora.
Hi, I'm Eleanora Ferrante. I'm the owner of Square Peg, Square Hole Coaching. I'm the other half of Vicki, so to speak. So while she does the financial side, I handle the applications, the essays. The only piece we're missing at the moment is the standardized test prep. But otherwise, between the two of us, we have everything covered.
So you may be wondering why the topic of divorce in college. You know, I know college finances is a huge thing and people have lots of questions, so why are we adding divorce on top of that? I guess another question I'd like to know from everybody, are you separated or divorced or widowed or, something other? If you can put that in the chat, that would be great. But the reason that we tend to do these is because divorce, as many people know, comes with its own set of complications, and you put college with it. And while the process is mostly the same, there are definitely some nuances for divorce and certain strategies that you could take to help you save more money. So, and candidly, I'm a divorced mom myself. I get it. I've lived through it. This is what I do. And, I'm passionate about helping our kids not go into debt. And I certainly don't want us to go into debt either on our kids' educations. So that's why it's so important that we do this.
And to tag along, while I'm not divorced, many of my clients are, or the parents are widowed, and that brings its own side to the story for the kids. So in terms of not just the financial side, but really even in terms of the application and the essays that they may choose to write, sometimes it matters where we end up picking schools, and how I end up working with the parents as well, right? If I've got a primary, usually one person comes in as the primary and I'm working with them, and then it's a matter of how do you want to work together with your other half.
Yeah, and just so you know, when you go through the divorce and college process, a big question that I always get, if both parents, if their financial information is needed, it's always kept separate. Everything is confidential. What your income, your assets will never be shared with a former spouse, and vice versa. That's always a big, huge question. So know that you're protected when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that's really important in terms of helping the kids through this whole process. We want to make sure you feel comfortable as well, knowing that you're in a safe space with us.
So should we jump right in and start talking about the college process? I guess let's begin. We had some 10th graders. Should we start in 9th or 10th grade?
Yeah, we have a lot of younger ones today. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a feel for the timeline in terms of just things to expect. And Vicki and I will be going back and forth to give you a feel for what you should be thinking about in terms of getting ready to apply, but then also the financial side of it. So, when I start with 9th graders and 10th graders, it's really about exploration in those years, getting a chance to try out different activities, to test the waters with some of the classes. And while I know most 9th graders have a pretty set schedule, there's not a lot of room for movement there. If you have the opportunity, though, to try something new and different anytime, it's good for them. If you have a child who's really interested in the arts, to give them those opportunities to take the art classes, or even outside of class, if they're interested in sports, to let them try a lot of things, right? It's a good chance in the early years to explore. I always want the kids to go check out the clubs and the organizations when there's a activities fair. Go down there and see what's happening. Take advantage of anything. YouTube tutorials on things they're interested in, going to your local library to see how you can do community service, right? It's about finding the things that you love, right? Because that's what 9th and 10th grade is. It's really about exploration. As you start to move out of 10th grade, though, then things start to shift a bit. 11th grade, as many of you know, is a crazy year, right? So anybody who has a junior, I'm impressed that you're here, right? Because it's just such a busy year. The kids are running around like crazy between driver's ed for a lot of them, right? Many are taking AP classes. You're prepping for the SAT or the ACT.
Wait, actually, you just brought that up. Should we just dive into a conversation about the ACTs and SATs? I'm sure everybody has tons of questions about it.
Yeah, and and it's interesting because that's a big topic for us these days. Do you even need to bother prepping for the SAT and the ACT?
Yes, the answer is yes.
Absolutely. Vicki and I are on the same page with this one, right?
There are financial reasons. There are, reasons that Eleanora could explain. I mean, it's just, it's better. It's better for the kids. The kids don't want to do it. I understand that, but it opens up opportunities for the kids.
I've been with these people. Let's go to Great Neck.
Can you move?
Got it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So with taking the SATs and the ACTs, the kids, especially if they do well, there's the opportunity for them to receive merit scholarships or get into honors programs that wouldn't be available to them if they hadn't taken the tests.
Correct. Right. And so while there are some schools that will say that they are test blind. So if your kid is interested in applying to University of California schools or Cal State, those are test blind. What does that mean? It means that even if you were to send a score, they're not going to look. They don't want to know. That's not what they're looking for. They're looking at grades and your activities and your recommendations and your essays. Okay, that's really nice for the California schools. But most of the other schools, even if they are test optional, which means it's your choice whether you want to send or not send your score, you send a good score, they're going to look at it and it's going to make a difference because it's another data point. That being said, if your kid is not good at taking tests, it's okay. I had somebody last year, she had 980 and she got into an Ivy League because we didn't send the test score. Because she had super high grades, she had great activities, and she had what that school wanted, right? So not sending that test score there was a smart move. So there are times that we will send scores to some schools, but not all of them. It really depends on that particular school, because I'm trying to help the kids get in, obviously, but also to get the merit aid that they are, and the honors programs that they are eligible for.
So what Eleanor is saying, that, where we both tie in together, the roles that we play in the college process, there's a lot of strategy that's involved in the planning and preparing, both on the admission side and the financial side. As far as divorce goes, or widowhood, it's important to consider the family dynamics and the finances, and using what could be perceived as your strengths and where to apply to help you save the most money. So, and same thing is true on the admission side. Somebody with a 980 getting into an Ivy League school, that's fantastic.
Right. Flip side, though, this year I had a student with a 1500. So 1500 out of a 1600 is very good on the SAT. And she got deferred from Northeastern. I had an equivalent student who got in, and she's like, what else could I have done? She's in the top, 10, not 10%, top 10 of her class. She has started her own clubs. She's got just an amazing person, but for whatever reason, they didn't need her. So even though we sent a 1500 there, they didn't, that wasn't enough, and like her grades and everything. So it's really, there was a lot of strategy behind it. I had a kid this year that had a 1400 and change, and we didn't send it to a number of his schools because it was too low. It's so crazy. So crazy, but we sent them to the others where it made sense. I see there's a question about, do you think SATs will continue to be optional after COVID? Yes, I definitely think they will continue to be optional.
I don't know if everybody saw it. I was going to mention about how the SATs are changing.
So for anybody who has a freshman or younger, the SAT will be digital, we think. By the time your freshman or younger gets up to the point of taking the SAT, it will be an hour shorter. It will be
2
online.
hours instead of 3 hours. Calculators,
yep, available for the whole thing. And what's interesting is that it will change on the fly. So the SAT that I get may not be the same SAT that Vicki gets, depending on how we answer some of the questions. So it will be a moving target, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, remember the SAT, it's a business. So they want the kids, even test optional, They still want the kids to take the tests and to pay for the tests and to submit them to the schools wherever they're going to submit them to. And hopefully they're hoping that the kids will do well and keep on taking the tests, and then you'll have the option about whether to send them. So by making these changes, which seem like they're very consumer friendly changes, they're hoping that people will be still drawn to them.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is that the ACT has also been talking for a while about going test optional. About going digital. So we're all curious to see now. ACT does they offer the test digitally in other countries. So I'm curious to see at what point it actually makes its way here. And everybody will then be doing everything digitally. So one thing to keep in mind too with it, while many of the schools have gone test optional, not all of them have. So if you are looking to apply to the Florida universities, the Georgia universities, they're requiring them. If you've got a kid who's looking at Georgetown, they're requiring them. So not everybody's test optional. Hey, Vicki, I see a question for you that definitely ties into the financial side. If someone wants to go to a certain college and they're not getting enough money from that college, should they be emailing and seeing if they could get more money? The old appeal question.
So this is a typical 12th grade issue. So, I mean, just setting it up, the child has already applied to colleges, assuming that they've already gotten in, they've already received their financial aid award letter, and then maybe they weren't offered enough money. So I'm just going to make up an example. Maybe the school costs $75,000 a year and they were awarded, a $20,000 grant, bringing it down, the cost down to $55,000. But maybe the family still can't afford that, or doesn't want to pay it, looking for a better deal. The answer is always no, unless you ask. So yeah, you can ask. I mean, schools are businesses. They want to fill their seats. The worst that they can do is say no. If you're going to do that, certainly don't demand more money. Build a case as to why, you believe that you should have more money. But yeah, it definitely, it doesn't hurt to ask. They will not rescind your acceptance.
Right. And to that point, there are buyers and sellers in terms of colleges, right? Because they are a business. And what we've seen the last year or two, enrollment has gone down in a number of schools. So they're trying harder. Some of those schools are trying harder to get the students. And so they're more willing to give money and discount the price.
So I just posted I'll mention this. I just posted on my social media page. So for whoever wants it, on Facebook, it's facebook.com facebook.com/college financial prep. And you'll find there, I literally just posted, there was an article that I saw yesterday from Yahoo, where they were talking about how for next year that due to increasing inflation and labor shortages and whatnot, that they're going to have to start raising tuition and fees and room and board. And one school reference, they were talking about how they're going to be raising it 2 years in a row. Now, it made me think, because all of these colleges, due to COVID, due to whatever reasons, numbers in the whole are down at many of the colleges, and they're businesses. They want to fill seats. So they're going to be raising their fees, and which they may in turn have more seats to fill because people won't want to pay to go there. So I'm wondering, on the flip side, are they going to be giving out larger merit scholarships? I mean, it's just going to be interesting to see what happens. But, to the question of, should I ask for more money? Yeah, ask for more money, because many of the schools have those seats to fill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you have to be careful. One of the things, I learned this trick from Vicki, because I had one of my students send me an email yesterday with a picture of her financial aid package, but it really wasn't a financial aid package. She was being given an unsubsidized loan. She's, what do you think? I'm like, well, let me explain to you what that is. So maybe, Vicki, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Okay, so when the kids apply to schools, they send in their 12th grade senior year. They send in their applications, they send in their test scores, and then you also send in the financial aid applications. And there's FAFSA, There's some schools require what's called the CSS profile. Some schools require their own institutional aid forms. Every single school requires FAFSA. So let's just talk about FAFSA right now. Anyway, the child, the family submits all of those different pieces. And then come the spring, after the child has already received their acceptances in the main, they'll receive a financial aid award letter from each school, which will detail what it costs to attend that school in terms of tuition fees, room and board, an estimate for books and personal expenses. And it'll also provide you with the number that you're getting in free money, scholarships and grants. And then we'll also tell the student if they've been awarded any work study and how much they've been awarded in student loans. Student loans is not free money. You want free money. Student loans, you may not have to pay it right then, but you still have to pay it back. So talking about that, freshman year, the students are able to get in student loans on their own up to $5,500 in student loan money from the federal government. That can be comprised of subsidized loans and unsubsidized loans. Subsidized loans, there's no interest accruing on them while the child is in college, and that's on a need-based only basis. You can earn $1 million a year and qualify for the maximum $5,500 in unsubsidized loans. I mean, you can, there's no need-based component to the $5,500 in unsubsidized. Anyone can qualify for that, but interest is going to start as soon as you accept the money freshman year. So it's those subsidized loans that are need-based. But yeah, when it comes time to look at those financial award letters, just keep in mind, even though the schools call loans financial aid, they still need to be paid back.
Yeah, it was quite eye-opening for my student as I explained that to her yesterday.
Well, I usually always do a financial literacy lesson with the parent and the child, and we'll be talking about how much the cost of college is, different types of colleges that they're considering, and what that might look like after 4 years, and how much potential loans there would be for both the student and the parents, because really $5,500 freshman year, the student can't afford the cost of college on their own. So really, it's going to affect everybody in the future. It affects the parents' retirement accounts. It affects the children being able to, start their own lives. They may be encumbered by all this debt. So just food for thought.
Absolutely.
That's why I'm always working with parents to try to, seriously, to minimize the cost of college. I know how awful it could be.
Right. So in terms of some of that, then, like, to go back to the timeline a little bit, as you look as for juniors, right, as they're starting to hone in on their activities, the things that they really love, those are the things that potentially can offer you opportunity for some merit aid, right? If you, I see the question here, what colleges are better for a band student? What should we look for, right? So music is definitely a space that some schools will give merit aid for. They're looking for kids for their marching band, for their symphonic, their performing arts. I had a student, Sacred Heart, threw them like an extra 10 grand if they wanted to be on Kickline. Right, just because, right? They were looking for, they saw that on her application. They really wanted her to come there. She ended up not going. It wasn't the place that she wanted at the end, but there is that piece to it. So it's important to start thinking about, depth of involvement. You don't need 20 activities, right? You shouldn't be overloading the kids. Honing in on the things that really they love and they want to do, because that's the space that, first of all, they'll get to see what they're interested in. It will give them an outlet from school, because junior year is so crazy. And it also gives you a chance for some opportunity for merit aid, right? Because junior year, you're working really hard towards your grades, because a rigorous course load is important, as rigorous as makes sense for your kid. So that might mean all APs, it might mean honors, it might mean regents, it's or some mix thereof. It's what makes sense for your kid. And it's also thinking about making sure they continue to take all the major subjects all the way through. So even though New York State diploma says you don't need to, Many colleges want you to, right? So it's just paying attention to those things to make you the most valuable applicant for these schools. So specifically when I'm looking at band students and working with them, the key to band students is what's your instrument? Same thing holds true in terms of, it's just like a sport, right? Or if you're a dancer or you play the violin. So you want to find a school that is good for your instrument and has professors there that you like and get along, that you want to take lessons from, that you have a good rapport with. So tuba, all right. So my friend was the littlest tuba at BC. Right. So when you're looking for brass, right? So I tend to work with, I've had trombones, I've had French horns. I haven't had a tuba yet that's gone in. But I always tell them you want to reach out to the schools, and the band teachers a lot of times can help them with this. You want to reach out to the school, say, this is the instrument I play. You want to connect with the professors there. When you go visit the schools, you want to try and meet with those professors, take a lesson with them, because those professors sometimes have some in for the application process and can talk to admissions, be like, I need the littlest tuba this year. I have to have them, right? And so, and that could help get your kid into that school, and potentially that could give you some money. Sometimes it doesn't do anything for you. But I will say this, so Maryland has a pretty good brass section, and so does Penn State. So just 2 schools off the top of my head, that's a little nugget on that. But junior year, you also take the PSAT. And while not a lot of people will score high enough with the PSAT to do anything with that, the kids who score at the top end of the PSAT are eligible for what's called the National Merit Scholarship. And there are various forms of that. There's the National Hispanic version, there's the general version. I've had a couple of kids who, because they scored so well on the PSAT, received those awards. And it's tied, you can get money for them at some of the schools. So there's a whole process with that. So don't discount any of the testing, right? There's potential for it no matter what. Anything else I'm missing junior year, Vicki, in terms of the financial side?
Junior year, it's a lot of self-awareness when it comes to finances. I think junior year is an extremely important time to start taking inventory, thinking about, first of all, I get it. We started to talk earlier. This is about divorce in college. Life happens. I'm sure in the main, most of us were not able to save up, exactly what we wanted to for our kids' education. I mean, that's not even divorce. That's just everybody. But yes, life happens. Anyway, what's so important is to think about how much you have saved. Maybe you have 529 plans for the kids. What can you contribute each year that they're in college? How many kids do you have that you have to plan for college for? And start thinking about all those hard questions. And then maybe, will grandparents help pay with college? Do you have employers that will, also contribute to the tuition for your children? What resources are available? Then, we can start thinking about what your projected EFC is going to look like. EFC stands for expected family contribution. And when you go senior year, when we're filling out FAFSA, it spits out an EFC, expected family contribution. And that's a number that the colleges use to determine what the government thinks that you can afford to pay for college that year. Now, no 2 colleges uses that EFC formula the same. If your EFC comes out, and of course I'm just making this up, if your EFC comes out saying that you can afford to pay $20,000 per year, I'm not making this up here, I'll give you 2 examples. School A costs $70,000 a year, but they fully 100% commit to meeting a student's need. So $70,000 a year, you can afford to pay 20. The difference is 50. They're going to give you a grant of $50,000. School B, though, may only meet 50% of a student's need. So the EFC, you can afford to pay $20,000. School B costs $70,000 too. There's that $50,000 difference. But because they're only meeting 50% of your need, the $50,000, they're only going to give you $25,000. So now you're expected to pay 20 plus an additional 25, so that's $45,000. So it's important to, what I always do with clients is we forecast this EFC, and then we're looking at the various colleges and how it's all going to play together in helping to develop that college list. So Eleanora and I work together a lot because she helps find the colleges, that are going to be academically and socially on target for your child. But I'm working with you to look at the finances and making sure it's a good fit all around. So yeah, it's an important exercise junior year before, the best way to save money on the cost of college is to plan ahead. And that's what happens, junior year.
And the piece to that too is you want to be done in 4 years or less, right? So I have a lot of students who will take college credit in high school. They will take AP classes, and depending on the school, some of those colleges will let you finish up sooner. So I have one student, she is finishing her art history degree in 3 years. She will then take on her master's and the year after that, so that instead of spending 4 years on undergraduate tuition, she's only spending 3. Huge savings, right? I have another student who is down at University of Florida, and they have this great business program. So once you're there and you can apply in and you can get your master's as well as your undergrad in the 4 years. So again, a huge cost savings, right? For anybody who's gone on to take an MBA, it's 2 years full time, right? And it's forever part-time. I know it took me 5 years at night to get mine. So, it's something to keep in mind is those programs where they have the combined programs, you can do it in a short amount of time. The schools, the SUNYs and the public schools will allow you a lot of times to put credit so that you take fewer classes.
For everyone here who's not from New York, SUNY is State University of New York. It's our public school system, public college system.
Right. So if you have a school, like a lot of the private schools, while they may give you credit for taking those APs, they still want you to take 120 credits of there. So you have to pay for 4 years of schooling, right? So it's more pieces to think about in terms of the financial. So for me, that's where the academic piece comes in, right? How can I help you find schools where you are a great academic fit and potentially can get done a little quicker? So Vicki, I see the question, does the EFC take into account the fact that there are multiple kids in a family?
Wait, say that again? I didn't see it.
Does the EFC take into account having multiple kids in college at the same time? I have 4 kids, only 2 years apart. And the answer is
okay. So the answer is right now, yes, it takes into account having multiple kids in college at the same time. However, there is, if you've heard of, and I don't know if you've heard of it, it's called the FAFSA Simplification Act, which is not very simple. It's actually making things much more complicated, especially if you're divorced. It's not even 100% a given. It was supposed to go into effect for this year, and it didn't because so many people complained. It may go into effect next year, and when it does go into effect, it includes the provision that they take away considering the amount of kids in college at the same time, which it doesn't even just impact divorced parents. That impacts everybody that has multiple kids in college at the same time. It's awful. And that's why there's been such pushback. So I'm not certain. I don't know if anybody's certain about what's happening with it. Yeah, exactly. That's one of the things. As long as I'm bringing up the FAFSA Simplification Act, I'll share with you also the part that impacts separated and divorced families specifically. Right now, schools that require FAFSA, how do I phrase this? There are certain schools that require only one parent's information. It's not even cut and dry with the CSS profile. I just need to leave it. I can't tell you offhand exactly which schools, but there are certain schools that will only require one parent's information. I certainly recommend if you're divorced, in the main, of course, it's going to depend on your individual situation, but in the main, that's where we tend to focus. It also depends on who the custodial parent is and whatnot. But yes, only one person would be putting together that EFC if your child is only applying to schools that will require that one parent. But there's a lot of strategy planning that goes into that too. in terms of who the custodial parent is and whatnot. Oh, and so the FAFSA Simplification Act, it was going to remove who the custodial parent is as the person that fills out the FAFSA form. And it's going to become the person that provides the most financial support for the child. Now, it's possible that even if one parent provides more in child support, it is possible to, make a case about the other parent providing more in support. But again, there hasn't been enough guidelines delivered around this. So yeah, I'm keeping my eyes on it, and we'll certainly have a plan when it comes out. Because I want to help everybody save money.
Yep. Right. So that answers that question: is if we're divorced, does each parent have an EFC?
Not exactly. It goes back to, it depends on the schools that the child applies to. EFC is derived from FAFSA, which is typically just one parent, but it depends on the situation. So don't just assume it's one parent. I don't know each of your, own situation that's going on. So, that's for a one-on-one. But sometimes some schools will require the information of both parents, which is why I said earlier that, everything is kept confidential from the other parent. So yes, sometimes the information is needed from both parents. And it's possible, if either or both parents are remarried, that they're going to take a look at, it's possible to have four parents' information, financial information be considered for one child. So, it all goes back into planning strategically before you develop that college list.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So in terms then of developing the college list, right? So as you're a junior, that's a great time to be thinking about that and looking for the schools that have the majors that your student wants, that has the activities, that has the location, and creating a
Has
list.
the price.
And the price, right? Like, what are all the things that are important to you, and creating a list of those criteria. Some kids have, you think about the emotional side of it, the social side of it, right? Where are you going to feel comfortable? Are you a student who likes to be at the top of their class, wants to be a big fish in a small pond? Or are you the kind of student who does better in a big lecture space where you can just listen and then go off to a smaller section afterwards to talk about what you learned in class? So a lot of considerations that go into building the list. You also want to think about what kind of support your child might need when they get there, right? So do they have an IEP, a 504 plan? Like, what are the things that they might need when they get there? So there's a lot of different aspects that go into it. But it's when you're looking at the school and you want to factor in not just the costs that you see online in terms of tuition and the fees and the room and the board and all that as Vicki goes through, but knowing your kid, are they going to want to come home a lot? And where are they, right? So my son went to school in Boston. We live on Long Island. That's a drive home. You can hop on a plane, you can hop on a train. It's pretty easy. But my cousin's kid who's in Louisiana, well, he's not coming home very often because it's just really expensive. So, taking into account some of those ancillary pieces that the schools aren't necessarily going to put in front of you, right? And so what do you have to remember and keep track of? Then as you're hitting, and it's a great time to be visiting colleges if possible. And I always say you can visit local schools. If you visit Penn State, just picture it when it's really hot and you get a feel for Clemson. Right? It's a different school, a lot more blondes at Clemson than there are at Penn State, but you get a lot of the similar kind of feel. So depending on where you live, you have plenty of opportunity to go visit schools near you and start to get an idea of what you like, what fits you. Where does your child feel most comfortable? When my kids were younger, when we would go on vacation, I would drive through college campuses, right? Just so they could have a feel that this is what it looked like. Sometimes because we went in, we ate there, right? Sometimes you can get really good food on some of these campuses. Highly recommend UMass, just FYI, right? But, getting a feel for the schools and starting to feel that out so that as you're hitting the summer before senior year, you're working on your essay, you're working on, starting to work on the applications, filling all of that out, Because it would be really ideal, and I try and do this with the students I work with, that by the time summer is over, that we've got the bulk of their applications ready and at least, in place. And that, because so many schools take the Common App right now. So that's one of the application platforms. So if you don't know where your kid is going to apply, you can still have them start filling that out over the summer. So it takes down a little bit of the stress, right? And they start getting things in place, writing their essay. They're going to need it for every school. So starting to get those things in place so that they're not so stressed out about it and feel a little bit more comfortable, right? Because
here's the other reason. I'm just going to talk about my own personal experience with this. If they get it done during the summer or get it done by Labor Day or something, they are, talking about the stress relief. They're in the middle of like all these AP classes, 12th grade. They have a million things going on with clubs and extracurriculars and homework. And it's just one less piece. As much as you can, get it done sooner.
Yeah. So my best story on that, actually two stories on that. Last year, I had two girls. They were at a Halloween party, and they were saying to their friends, or, like, this is great. We should, I'm so happy to be out, blah, blah. And their friends like, oh, we have to go home. I'm like, why do you have to go home? We have to work on our applications. And my two were done. So they're like, we don't have to go home because we're all finished. And I had a kid this year that he got injured and he had to have surgery, and all sorts of crazy stuff happened because he's a soccer player. He was out of commission for 2 weeks, but he was so far ahead in the process, getting everything done. There was no added stress, right? I was like, go do what you need to. I'll see you in a couple of weeks when you're feeling better and moving on. Right? Because senior year, Vicki's right. You have there's so much for the kids to be doing and getting their applications in, but then you have a lot to do also, because that's the time when it's time for the FAFSA and the CSS profile. Right?
Yes.
So come October.
Yeah, October 1st is the big date. It's definitely important. At that point, hopefully, where your kid's applying to schools. You're considering finances when developing that college list, and then it's time to jump into FAFSA and CSS profile. I think I saw that there was a question in the chat.
There is. How do you find out if a school only requires the FAFSA for one parent?
Seriously, there's no FAFSA list. Each college has their own, website, and you can always go to the financial aid pages and they'll say what they need. Depending on the state, New York also has state financial aid applications. Pennsylvania has state applications, but it's on a state-by-state basis. So yeah, you're best off looking at the schools websites to determine, or we could work together, but if you're doing it on your own, that would be my best suggestion.
Right. And the financial aid stuff opens up in October for both the forms. I always like to get applications in earlier because the pool of money is bigger up front.
Yeah.
Right?
So what I like to tell people, imagine that like each school has a big pot of money, and the longer you wait to submit applications, that pot starts to get smaller and smaller. So it's important to do it early. Another thing, a lot of times people will say to me, oh, I'm not going to qualify for financial aid. Why should I do it? Why should I fill out the applications? Well, one, some of the schools that give out merit money require to have a financial aid form on file. I know that's true. It was true for my son. It's true for other people. Another reason, if your child wants to apply for work-study programs, and again, it's a need-based program, but if you want to apply, it's done through the FAFSA application.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of your income, if you're going to need student loans, that $5,500 that I mentioned freshman year, and it's $6,500 sophomore year, and $7,500 for each year, junior and senior year. That comes with the lowest interest rate. It doesn't need a cosigner, but again, the child has to complete FAFSA to get that student loan. Last reason for everybody to complete FAFSA, I like to compare it to an insurance policy. I hope nobody ever gets hit by a bus, but in that unlikely, horrific event, if something horrible happens in the family, it's possible to go back to the school and ask if they can review, the new financial situation in the household and possibly reduce the cost. So it's much easier to do that when the FAFSA form is already on file as opposed to having to wait another year. So yeah, lots of very important reasons for everybody to make sure that they fill out those financial aid forms.
Right, and get them done. Right, so once you've gotten those in, so that's the fall of senior year, you've written whatever supplemental essays the schools may require. You've taken all the tests that you feel that you're going to take and submitting them. Right, and so there's a couple different deadlines. So a lot of the schools have what's called an early action deadline that typically, if you're a Southern school, it's October. If you're a Northern school, it's November. Early action is non-binding, so I really like it a lot because it tells the school you're interested, you've gotten your application in and done, and then you don't have to decide until April, right? So May 1st is the deadline for students to tell the schools. And if it's early action, even though they tell you early if you've gotten accepted, you don't have to decide if that's your school or not. That's a big difference from early decision schools. Early decisions, you are
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Right. It's a binding commitment to that school. It says, if you accept me, then I'm coming. So
You're coming regardless of finances.
So, and what people get caught up on in this is if you start to look at the numbers that, especially this year, a lot of schools have been filling a good portion of their classes through early decision, but it makes sense because back to what Vicki said, colleges are a business. They want to guarantee that somebody's going to fill that seat. So if they know that you have to say yes once they accept you, well,
there's no negotiating. There's no asking for more money.
Right.
There's no change, you can't, what's the word I'm looking for? You're not supposed to change your mind. You're committed. It's, they say it's a binding contract, I'll let you address that, but
yeah. And it is. I mean, occasionally I've heard of people able to get out of it, but they're unicorns, right? They're few and far between. And so I always tell my students, you have to be 100% sure that not only is this your absolute best school for you, it fits you best academically, socially, emotionally, but that you can hand over $300,000 if it's a private school.
You know what? Can I talk about that for a second? So what I want to say is that, every child, every student, every person, has a different intended career path. And it depends, I suppose, or definitely, what that child's intentions are. If a student is intending to go into teaching or social work, and they're likely to work in the same exact hospital or the same exact public school, no matter what college they go to, no matter how much they pay for that education, and they're going to, take the same licensing exams and, ultimately have the same level of income, you have to think about, is it worth spending that extra money? On the flip side, maybe that child really does have a specific career path that, spending $300,000, is ultimately worth it, because the return on that investment will be so great. But, that's one thing I never, ever, ever tell clients what school they should go to. I want to make sure that they're informed and that you make appropriate decisions for your family. But this is definitely one of those considerations where you have to think about, is it worth it or not? So, it's important to discuss with your child what their intentions are.
Right. And, and I've worked with students who have gotten to, I'll call it a tier 2 school, right? It's a good school. They did great there. They came out with a 4.0 and change, and they got involved with the right activities, and they did research with professors, and professors really got to know them. They had great recommendations. And I know one student that she came out of a school that many of you may not have even heard of. She got into every Ivy and Stanford for her graduate work in organic chemistry and finished her postdoc at Harvard. She spent nothing to go to college because she went to a local public school in her state, right? She's the favorite child in her parents' house, right? You can't beat that. Right. So those are all things that, to take into consideration. So you've got, you apply as early as possible, or EA, not ED, right? Early action preferably. There's also then regular decision, which, for anybody who's in my age range or so, that's pretty much all there was when we applied. And that's typically around January. Sometimes it's later. I have some schools that my kids are applying to that it's March, it's April, it's actually July. Some of them it's earlier. Some of the Florida schools, it's November, right? But so regular decision though is you apply, there's no binding to it, right? You're part of the general pool, and they will let you know by April 1st whether or not you've gotten in. And so, and then what happens is you start to receive all the acceptances, and you've got to kind of go through them and as best you can figure apples to apples, because it's really hard sometimes to be able to see the difference in those financial aid packages. How much do they really want your child, and what are they willing to give you for them? And sometimes you get lucky and initial package is really good, right? I've seen that in some of the schools where I had, I guess I had like 4 or 5 kids apply to University of Miami this year. My one with the lowest test scores and grades was the only one that got in. The others were deferred. Right? So now you got to go, what happened there? How could that possibly be? Well, the answer is that the other ones were going for business, psychology, international relations, right? So very tough
Popular?
majors. Yeah, very popular majors. My other student, on the other hand, was going for a theater major, stage management specifically, and they needed stage management majors because they don't have any sophomores or freshmen stage management majors. So they're all aging out. He got 30 grand a year.
Fabulous. Wow.
Right? We're like, what the heck? And so, there's all these aspects to it that you have to take into consideration, right? Majors do play a role. And I'm not suggesting that you pick stage management just to get into a school, because that's not how it works. Okay. Because you have to audition, have a portfolio, and do all of that. And it's a lot harder to get in a lot of schools for stage management, right? But it is something to think about. Like, is there a school where, so some of the other schools where he applied to stage management, they didn't need him. So he did not get in, and he did not get money, right? So those are some of the other aspects to it. If your kid is, is a quarterback, but that school's got 3 quarterbacks lined up, well, they're not going to give you money for him to show up unless all of a sudden he is, the next Tom Brady. So
here, let me just jump in and say this. When you are planning for college and discussing everything with your child, and their career path, think about if your child is likely also going to want or need to go to graduate school. And the reason that I'm bringing that up is because of the finances. Me personally, I'd rather see somebody go to a less expensive, less known undergraduate program and save the money for graduate school if that's the way it needs to be. So just food for thought as you're planning. Also, it could certainly, we were talking about student loans and it all adding up, especially on the graduate school level. So, just something else to keep in mind.
Yep. So it's a question, do you have to declare a major during the application process? And the answer is it depends. So there are plenty of schools where you can go in undeclared. Sometimes you have to go in undeclared business, undeclared liberal arts, undeclared health sciences. And sometimes you can just go plain and simple undeclared. And I have a ton of schools that are great exploratory schools. You don't know what you want yet. You can go to these schools and you can still get out in 4 years with the degree that makes sense for you. That being said, sometimes you should apply with a major, because one, if you know what you want, sometimes some of the schools will look at you. If you go in undeclared, they will assume that you may end up in one of their most restrictive majors and tough to get in ones. And so they will review your application against those kids, right? And you might want something totally different that doesn't have those same kind of criteria surrounding it, right? So if you have a feel for it, yes. And it's also helpful if you have a sense of the major. At least, I don't necessarily need you to know if you want accounting or you want to be finance, but if you know you want business. So we make sure that the school you go to has a business school. Right. I had a kid a couple of years ago. She really wanted to go to the University of UNC Chapel Hill, but the major she wanted, they didn't have. I was like, that major's not here. You might look really good in light blue, but that's not going to, you can't go to this school for that, right? So things to consider. I saw a little further back. So once you have decided on a school and you put down the deposit, somebody was asking the question, how much in general is a deposit? It's usually about $500. I don't know if you've seen
Let me
it.
say this about deposits, because I always get this question, or I always hear about it after the fact. Do not rush to put down a deposit. It takes away any, if you're going to ask for more money, ask before you put a deposit down. Once you put the deposit down, they have no reason to give you more money. They know that you want to go there. So no need to rush, in my opinion.
In my opinion as well. And I also say, look, you're talking about 16, 17-year-olds. They change their minds, 30 times in a day about what to have for lunch. So, give them as much time as possible to decide on the place that makes the most sense. And the question about, is there any kind of discount that goes with that if you're widowed? I have never seen one, because it's a deposit on the cost of attending that school. So Vicki, have you ever seen anybody discount the, no, right?
No.
Okay. Question about, my son is interested in neurology. He could go the pre-med route or psychology, which would be better to do psychology, as it isn't as difficult to major. The answer is that if you're going to go to med school, you could major in business, you can major in engineering, you can major in psychology, anything you want, as long as you take all of the prereqs that you need for medical school. So your major is not what the driving force is there. And obviously, if you are a biology major, then you're going to be checking off a lot of those boxes for your major. Versus if you're a business major, it's going to be a little harder to get in all the prereqs, right? So it's not so much the major as the coursework that you take, right? So that's something to consider if you want to be a veterinarian, if you want to be any kind of medical doctor. It's like, what will you need to get into those schools later? Vicki, how early can you start negotiating if you apply early action and start to get accepted?
Well, you start to get accepted and you may learn what your merit scholarship is, but you won't see your whole financial award package typically till like March. So not till after you see the whole package. And the package will include, need-based aid, merit scholarships, will include all of it. So yeah, you should wait till then. Yeah,
I know a lot of my kids get all excited because they get their letter and then they don't have a financial aid package. Like, what happened? I'm like, well, because they come separately. It's not always together. And sometimes what you'll get is you might get like a presidential award with your acceptance letter, but that's not your full package.
Right.
Necessarily. All right. So Vicki, I know we're coming up on 8 o'clock. So trying to be cognizant of everybody's time. Any final thoughts that you want to make sure you pass along to this group?
Final thoughts. Okay. Final thoughts. I hope everybody can appreciate this, especially when it comes to divorce in college. Communication. I know it's a topic we all don't like. However, when it comes to our kids, it's important that we certainly communicate with our kids and communicate with our exes for the benefit of our kids. And it is difficult as anything. I've lived through it myself. But it's so important to try to get on the same page, especially with your kids early on. There are too many families that can't talk about the finances. And then come April, and really this goes for married or divorced. I have married friends this happened to. They never spoke about what was doable financially, and the child only had their heart set on a certain school, and mom and dad just couldn't do it, and bedlam breaks out, and there's crying, there's stress, there's this, there's that. Set a goal early on, work towards that common goal with your child, make sure you're on the same page. That way they'll be, everyone will be much happier in the end.
Yeah. And my parting words kind of tie into that. There's 4,000 or so colleges and universities in the United States. There are plenty of schools that make sense. And what's on the t-shirt is less important than what's in the t-shirt, right? So the school that's best for your child is the school that has the academic program that they want, where they will succeed academically, where they'll succeed socially, where they will be comfortable and engaged. and really want to participate and get the most they can out of those years. And there are plenty of schools that will check all those boxes as well as the financial box for them. So they just need to think a little broader. They need to understand this is 4 years of your life. It's not your entire life. You are not buying a house. It is not that kind. It's a play. There are plenty of options. You just have to be open to them. And that's what Vicki and I do. We help you figure out what those options are so that they make sense. Your kid has the best possible list come April, and they're happy because they have great choices that make sense and check their boxes.
Perfect.
And with that, we are coming up on 8.
Everyone will be in touch. We'll send you a copy of the recording. We'll also send you a timeline that both Eleanor and I have prepared together. So it'll cover both the admission side and the financial side. So you can keep track of, what you should be thinking about and when. And if you want, feel free to get in touch with us.
Yep. So I'm just throwing my website in, and Vicki, if you want to do that too in the chat, so that you can contact me through mine. You can see all my resources. My blogs are all there. Vicki's got the same thing on hers. So by all means, reach out to us if you have any further questions.
Okay, thanks everyone. I'll stop the recording. Where is it to stop?